There are lots of things that have changed in the way we drive over the years, not least in the way new drivers pass their driving test. Since its launch in 1935, there have been many significant changes over the years. However, in this video, we're taking a look at how the test in the 1980s compares to the current test in 2025. What will the differences mean for learner drivers then and now, plus who was most likely to pass? Anyone who passed their driving test in the 80s wouldn't have taken a theory test. A couple of questions from the examiner as your test was starting, and that was about as much theory as you needed. From July 1996, the introduction of the theory test meant drivers had to prove a good knowledge of the highway code and driving knowledge, with a separate test before they could take their practical test. Whilst the theory test adds another challenge before you can get on the road as a full licence holder, knowing the rules of the road is crucial to staying safe behind the wheel. To pass, you must give at least 43 correct answers to 50 questions. Before the introduction of the hazard perception test, the only opportunity to assess the learner driver's ability to perceive hazards was during the driving test itself, if and when hazards occurred. This meant if you had no hazards on your route to deal with, you weren't assessed on them. In 2002, hazard perception was added as an additional section to the theory test. This was designed to test candidates' awareness of hazards on the road, ensuring they're as prepared as possible for real-life hazards. It involves watching 14 short video clips, each showing everyday driving scenes with at least one developing hazard. To pass, you must score at least 44 out of 75 points. For drivers who took their test around 40 years ago, there were no show me tell me questions to learn or answer during the test. It was a case of relying on the examiner's observation during the driving test, leaving you to pick up how to do things like checking your engine oil and coolant after you'd passed. Since 2003, every driver must prepare for the show me tell me part of the driving test. Currently, drivers must memorise the answers for the 7 show me questions and 14 tell me questions, as you'll be asked one of each during your test. It makes sense to gain this knowledge before you pass, as it will be needed to operate your car safely afterwards. For example, knowing how to spot that your brakes are faulty before you crash would be pretty handy. Taking a driving test in the 1980s would involve the learner following everything the examiner told them to do, with little room to show if they knew how to read road signs or had a general sense of direction. Unfortunately, this meant that after their test, the driver was completely unprepared to plan routes for themselves once they started driving on their own. Since 2017, the independent driving section of the test requires the learner to drive for around 20 minutes by either following a Sat-Nav or traffic signs. The examiner will set up the route of the Sat-Nav or explain which signs to follow. The idea is that this part of the test focuses more on the kind of realistic driving you will encounter day to day. Can you drive safely and calmly while following directions independently? It isn't a navigation test, so going the wrong way won't necessarily lead to a fail. However, causing danger will. "40 years ago, drivers on their test had to complete a 3-point turn and reverse around a corner. Surprisingly, there was no type of parking on the test, so how they managed to park at the end of every journey after passing was a mystery. Since December 2017, those manoeuvres no longer feature in the driving test. Today, you'd be asked to carry out one of the following: the reverse parallel park, parking in a bay, either forward or reverse, The examiner will tell you which you have to do. And there's also the possibility of being asked to pull up on the right-hand side of the road and reverse for 2 car lengths and rejoin the traffic. Whatever manoeuvre you are asked to do, you must complete it with good car control and observation skills. Up until 2018, learner drivers were not allowed on the motorway. You didn't get a chance to drive on the motorway until after you'd passed. And for anyone who had to do this, we're sure lots of you can remember the fear of merging onto the motorway for the first time with zero training. Although not part of the driving test, from 2018, learners could take to the motorway with a driving instructor in a dual-controlled car. So although you won't be tested on it, it means you'll have a head start when tackling it for the first time on your own after you pass. This was a welcome change for many new drivers, as driving on the motorway for the first time is a top cause for concern for many learners. New drivers 40 years ago would have been planning their routes using a map, and the only tech in the car would have been the radio, which wasn't used during the test. The examiner would direct the learner throughout the test. Of course, times are changing, and in the same change to the driving test in 2017, when the manoeuvres were updated and the independent driving section changed, you may also now be asked to follow a Sat-Nav. The change to the test comes with the times and is designed to help prepare learner drivers for a life on the road as much as possible. There was little in terms of specific training for new drivers once they'd passed their test in the 1980s. If you wanted extra training after you'd passed your test, you could take the advanced driving test, which, at the time, was something driving enthusiasts were more likely to take. Today, new drivers can choose to take a Pass Plus course, giving them as much knowledge and skill as possible when it comes to driving, and, in theory, making them less likely to be involved in an accident. The DVSA introduced Pass Plus in 1995. This is an optional course that drivers can take after passing their practical driving test, which allows them to get additional driving experience from an approved driving instructor. So, it looks like it was easier to pass your test in the past, but we think the extra skills needed or the new test will help keep you safe on the busier roads we have now. So we are glad the driving test has evolved over the years. If you found this video interesting, then please visit our channel, as there are over 200 more tutorial videos to help you improve your driving. And if you would like to help us make new videos, then please consider becoming a member of our channel. Thanks for watching.